Good morning and happy Friday. We are going to be tracking some severe weather potential today across the Midwest and even into the southern plains. So let's get into this area that we have yellow on the map here. This is going to be a level 2 out of 5 slight risk in place for much of eastern Missouri today. This also includes places like Columbia, St. Louis, St. Robert, and down to Poplar Bluff. So make sure that you are going to be weather aware. This is pretty much outside of my coverage area, but worth noting in the video, as I'm sure some other people will be watching as well. So let's break it down. We're going to start going by the greatest potential for severe weather down to the least. So the main driving risk today for the slight risk will be damaging winds, which is a 15% risk. So this includes the entire slight area, like I said, Columbia, Jeff City, Lebanon, Rolla, Salem, Poplar Bluff, West Plains, St. Louis, and up to Hannibal. So if you're going to be in that slight risk, you have this 15% risk for excess or for strong winds as well. The next risk down from that is going to be a 5% hail risk. As you can see, doesn't really line up with really anything. It's going to be a fairly small corridor to where these storms are going to be able to produce enough of an updraft to be able to sustain a hail risk. So that's why it's pretty limited. Like I said, just a 5% risk, and outside of that's below 5%. So not overly concerned with hail, but it is technically possible that we could see some at some point during the day. The lowest but non-zero risk is going to be a 2% tornado risk for the day. So as you can see, we do have a tornado risk that includes most of that slight coverage area as well as parts of the marginal risk outside of the slight. So Kirksville, Quincy, Mulberry, Columbia, Lebanon, Rolla, Sullivan, Salem, Farmington, Poplar Bluff, Cape Girardeau, and even down into northern Arkansas. So while we're not really expecting tornadoes to be a main risk, the risk for them is not zero. There could be a potential for a few spin up type tornadoes, but we're not really expecting there to be a ton of widespread tornadoes as well as very strong tornadoes today. So moving down to the WoolawayWx coverage area here in southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas, and northeast Oklahoma, most of the area is going to be under a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk for the day. Main concern is going to be the potential for some gusty winds in these storms. So really not anything overly crazy in terms of severe weather potential. Just felt like we needed to kind of break up what we've been doing the last couple of days and make a video. So that's what we're here doing. So like I said, not really expecting a ton of potential for severe weather across the area today, but we'll be keeping an eye on as the evening rolls around. So you might be curious on kind of what is driving this risk, because we really don't have, an absolutely major system or anything happening. Like, it really hasn't changed very much over the last couple of days. But we do kind of have something that kind of unique that we're going to see today. I wouldn't say really unique, but more of, enjoyable potentially. So one thing I do want to note is we're still going to have some fairly warm temperatures. There is some heat related products issued from the National Weather Service that's going to be basically along and west of I-49, where we could see some fairly warm heat index values as well. So the main thing I want to look at here is going to be our temperatures. So these are going to be surface-based temperatures 2 meters off the ground. And as we are around 2 p.m. here, as you can see, most of the area is going to be probably in the mid to upper 90s, even warmer in some locations according to this, but we're just going to go with mid to upper 90s. With that being said, storms need moisture to develop. So yes, we have a really warm environment. However, our humidity factor is actually kind of low on the backside of it. So most of the coverage area is going to be within like mid 30s to, you know, mid 40s in terms of relative humidity values in the early afternoon at least. So not a ton of moisture there at the moment. However, if we go ahead and move up a few hours, you can kind of note we have a few kind of distinct features happening here on the map, and I'll kind of highlight these real fast. So we kind of have this rather sharp gradient that kind of runs down from like Jeff City through like the Ozarks near Bolivar and down towards Joplin. We also kind of have another one that runs from east side of Tulsa up through McDowell and Berry counties and up towards Springfield. And kind of what we're seeing here is these are going to be kind of like miniature cold fronts. We're not really going to feel them very much. Like it's not going to be like an abrupt change of, dropping 10 to 20 degrees, but it is technically considered a cold front. And then, so if we go and switch over to our relative humidity, as you can kind of note where those kind of miniature cold fronts are, we're actually getting an increase in our surface based moisture. And so, what that's going to do is have an environment that develops later on in the evening that could produce a few storms. And the main thing to kind of note here is if we go and switch back to our reflectivity, we already start seeing a little bit of this development up, you know, near the capital at Just City. But also as we kind of progress ourselves towards 8 p.m., now you really start seeing a little bit more of that develop down, through Taney County, through Northwest Arkansas, Eastern Oklahoma, down into South Central Oklahoma. So we're not really expecting a ton of widespread severe weather today. However, we could see a few pop-up showers develop over the area, and those could be strong, maybe even a couple severe at times. So